The knock came like a gunshot in the quiet of my apartment, sharp and unyielding, shattering the stillness of a late Seattle evening. I froze, paintbrush hovering over the canvas, my heart lurching as if it knew who stood on the other side. I wasn't ready for him, not tonight. Not ever, but Julian Caldwell didn't wait for invitations. I set the brush down, wiping my hands on my jeans, and crossed the creaky hardwood floor of my one-bedroom haven. The place was a mess, canvases stacked against the walls, half-empty coffee mugs littering the counter, and a pile of overdue bills glaring at me from the kitchen table. Rent was due 3 days ago, and I had exactly $47 in my bank account. Julian, my landlord, wasn't the type to let that slide. Opening the door, I found him leaning against the frame, his presence filling the hallway like a storm cloud. At 42, Julian was all sharp edges and quiet power silver flecks in his dark hair, a tailored coat that screamed old money, and eyes that could pin you in place. He wasn't just my landlord. He was a lawyer, a man who owned half the buildings in this artsy corner of Capitol Hill and probably half the secrets in them too. "Elliot," he said, his voice low, almost too smooth. "You're late again." I swallowed, my throat tight. I know. I'm working on it. Julian, I just need a few more days." My voice cracked, betraying the panic I tried to hide. I was 25, a struggling artist with dreams bigger than my bank account, and Julian Caldwell was the last person I wanted to disappoint. He stepped inside without asking, his polished shoes clicking on the floor. The air shifted, heavy with the scent of his cologne, something expensive, like cedar and smoke. He glanced around, taking in the chaos of my life, his expression unreadable. "You always say that," he murmured, his gaze landing on the canvas I'd been working on, a half-finished portrait of a man's face. Eyes haunted, mouth caught mid-sentence. "This is new." I flushed, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt with him looking at my work. "It's nothing. Just practice." I didn't tell him the face was his, sketched from memory after our last tense encounter. I didn't tell him how I'd spent hours trying to capture the way his jaw tightened when he was angry, or the flicker of something softer when he thought no one was watching. He turned to me, his eyes narrowing. "Practice doesn't pay the rent, Elliot." But there was no venom in his voice, just a quiet weight that made my chest ache. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint lines around his eyes, the ones that hinted at a life lived harder than his polished exterior suggested. "You're talented," he said, almost reluctantly. "But talent doesn't keep the lights on." I wanted to argue, to tell him I was close to a gallery deal, that my next piece would sell for thousands. But the truth was, I was drowning bills, doubts, and the constant fear that I'd never be enough. "I'll get you the money," I said instead, my voice barely above a whisper. "I swear." Julian studied me for a long moment, his gaze piercing, like he could see straight through my bravado. Then, unexpectedly, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're not the only one struggling. You know," he said, his voice softer now, almost confessional. "This building, it's bleeding me dry. Taxes, repairs, tenants who can't pay." He paused, his eyes meeting mine. "Like you." I blinked, caught off guard. Julian Caldwell, the untouchable landlord, admitting weakness. It was like seeing a crack in a marble statue. "Then why do you keep it?" I asked before I could stop myself. "This place, these tenants, why not sell and walk away?" He laughed, a low, bitter sound. "Because it's mine. Because it's home." He looked around my apartment again, his gaze lingering on the rainbow flag pinned above my couch, a quiet declaration of who I was. "And because people like you make it worth it, even when you drive me up the wall." My heart stuttered. Was that a compliment? A jab? With Julian, it was impossible to tell. He was a puzzle I couldn't solve. A man who kept everyone at arm's length yet showed up at my door like clockwork. Month after month. Never quite as cold as he wanted to seem. "I'll get you the money," I repeated, more to convince myself than him. "Just give me a week." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved to the window, looking out at the city lights flickering through the rain. "You remind me of someone," he said finally, his voice so quiet I almost missed it. "Someone who used to paint like the world was on fire." I wanted to ask who. To pry open the door he'd just cracked. But something in his posture guarded told me to stay quiet. Instead, I watched him. The way the light caught the silver in his hair. The way his fingers twitched like he was holding something back. 7 days, he said at last, turning back to me. "But don't make me regret this. Elliot." He stepped toward the door, then paused, his hand on the knob. "And clean this place up. It's a fire hazard." I laughed, a nervous sound that broke the tension. "Yes, sir." He shot me a look half amused, half exasperated, and then he was gone, leaving me alone with my racing heart and a canvas that held too many secrets. That night, I couldn't sleep. Julian's words echoed in my head, mingling with the memory of his voice, his presence. I sat at my easel, sketching furiously, trying to capture the moment he'd stood at my window, vulnerable for the first time. Who was he, really? Not the landlord, not the lawyer, but the man who'd looked at my art like it meant something. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door, written in Julian's precise handwriting. "Meet me at the coffee shop on Pine Street. Noon. We need to talk." My stomach flipped. Was this about the rent? Or something else entirely? I arrived at the cafe early, clutching my sketchbook like a shield. The place was crowded, filled with the hum of conversation and the clink of mugs. Julian was already there, seated at a corner table, his coat draped over the chair. He looked different in the daylight, less imposing, more human, with a faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. "Elliot," he said as I sat down, pushing a coffee toward me. "I have a proposition." I raised an eyebrow, wary. "What kind of proposition?" He leaned forward, his voice low. "I'm hosting an art event at the building next month. Local artists. Small crowd. Decent exposure. I want you to show your work." My jaw dropped. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." He sipped his coffee, watching me over the rim. "But there's a catch." Of course there was. With Julian, there was always a catch. "What is it?" "I need you to help me organize it. Logistics. Setup. Dealing with the other artists." And he hesitated, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't name. "I need you to paint something new. Something personal." I stared at him, my mind racing. An art event. A chance to show my work. It was everything I dreamed of. But the way he said personal sent a shiver down my spine. What did he want from me? And why did it feel like he was asking for more than just a painting? "Deal," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But only if you tell me why you're doing this." He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made my chest tighten. "Maybe I just want to see what you're capable of, Elliot. Or maybe I'm tired of collecting rent from people who surprise me." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. This was more than a life flinny, it was a chance to prove myself. To him and to the world. But as I looked into his eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. That Julian Caldwell was about to take something from me far more intimate than rent. The coffee shop meeting lingered in my mind like a half-remembered dream. Julian's words looping through my thoughts as I walked back to my apartment. A chance to show my art. To step out of the shadows of my own doubts, it was exhilarating. But his request for something personal gnawed at me. What did he see in me that made him think I could deliver? Back in my apartment, I stared at the blank canvas. its emptiness mocking me. I'd always painted from instinct, letting emotion guide my brush. But this felt different. Julian wasn't just asking for art. He was asking for a piece of my soul. I grabbed my sketchbook, flipping to the page with his face the one I'd hidden from him last night. His eyes stared back at me, sharp and searching, and I wondered if he'd ever let anyone truly know him. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Julian wasn't kidding about the work involved. He texted me a list of tasks: contacting artists, securing permits, arranging catering. I spent hours on the phone, my sketchbook forgotten, while Julian's vision for the event took shape. He wanted it to be a celebration of Capitol Hill's queer community, a nod to the neighborhood's history as a haven for those who didn't fit in anywhere else. It was a cause I believed in, but his passion surprised me. He wasn't just a landlord throwing a party. He was invested, almost fiercely so. We met again at the building's community room, a dusty space with exposed brick walls and high ceilings. Julian was already there, sleeves rolled up, moving tables with a focus that made him look younger, less guarded. "You're late," he said without looking up, but there was a teasing edge to his voice. "Blame the bus," I shot back, dropping my bag. "You didn't tell me I'd be playing event planner and mover." He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "You're an artist. Multitasking is in your blood." I laughed, but my eyes caught on the way his shirt clung to his shoulders, the way his hands moved with quiet confidence. I shook it off, focusing on the task at hand. We spent the afternoon arranging the space, hanging fairy lights, and debating where to place the art. Every time our hands brushed or our eyes met, the air crackled, and I wondered if he felt it too. That evening, as we sat on the floor surrounded by paint cans and blueprints, Julian handed me a beer. "You're good at this," he said, his voice soft. "Better than I expected." I took a sip, hiding my flush. "Don't sound so surprised. I'm not just a broke artist." "No," he said, his gaze steady. "You're not." He leaned back, studying me. "Why do you stay here, Elliot? This building, this city, it's not easy for someone like you." "Someone like me?" I raised an eyebrow, challenging him. "You mean queer? Or broke?" He didn't flinch. "Both. And talented. You could leave. Go somewhere cheaper. Easier. Why stay?" I hesitated, the question hitting deeper than I expected. "Because this place feels like home," I said finally. "The people, the energy, the history. I grew up in a small town where I had to hide who I was. Here, I don't have to." Julian nodded, his expression unreadable. "I get that," he said quietly. "More than you know." I wanted to ask what he meant, but he stood abruptly, breaking the moment. "We've got a lot to do tomorrow. Get some rest." The next day, I met the other artists, vibrant, eclectic, unapologetically themselves. There was Mia, a trans photographer whose work captured raw emotion, and Carlos, a non-binary sculptor with a wicked sense of humor. They welcomed me like family, but I felt like an imposter. My art wasn't political or groundbreaking. It was just me. Would it be enough? Julian seemed to think so. He checked in daily, his presence a constant hum in the background of my life. One afternoon, while we were hanging flyers around the neighborhood, he stopped in front of a mural, a vibrant explosion of color depicting queer icons from the 80s. "This," he said, pointing at it. "This is why we're doing this. To remind people we're still here, still fighting." I studied him, the passion in his voice, the way his eyes lit up. "You talk like you've been in that fight," I said cautiously. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the mural. "I lost someone," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "Back then, someone who mattered." My heart clenched. I wanted to reach out, to touch his arm, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "I'm sorry." He shook his head, brushing it off. "It was a long time ago. Come on. We've got work to do." But the moment stayed with me. A glimpse into the man behind the landlord. I started to notice the little things, the way he lingered when he talked to me, the way his smile softened when he thought I wasn't looking. And I couldn't deny the pull I felt, the way my pulse raced when he was near. By the end of the week, the event was coming together, but my painting wasn't. I stayed up late, staring at the canvas, trying to find the personal piece Julian wanted. I painted fragments of my life-me small-town childhood. The first time I kissed a boy. The freedom of Capitol Hill, but nothing felt right. Nothing felt like enough. One night, Julian showed up at my door unannounced, holding a bottle of wine. "You look like you need a break," he said, stepping inside before I could protest. "You're not wrong," I admitted, slumping onto the couch. He poured 2 glasses, handing me one, and we sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the week settling between us. "Tell me about the painting," he said, his voice gentle but insistent. "What's holding you back?" I took a deep breath, the wine loosening my tongue. I don't know how to make it personal without exposing myself. My fears, my past, who I am. It's terrifying. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. "That's what makes it art, Elliot. That's what makes it matter." I swallowed, my heart pounding. "What about you? What's your personal story?" For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set his glass down, his voice low. "I don't talk about it because it hurts. But maybe it's time I did." And then he told May about Michael, the man he'd loved in the 80s, the man he'd lost to AIDS when the world was too cruel to care, the man who'd painted with the same fire Julian saw in me. Julian's words hung in the air, heavy with a grief I could feel in my bones. He sat across from me, his hands clasped tightly around his wine glass, his eyes distant, lost in a memory I could only imagine. For the first time, I saw him not as my landlord, not as the man who held my fate in his hands, but as someone who'd loved and lost in a way that left scars. "I'm sorry," I said again, the words feeling inadequate. "That must have been unbearable." He nodded, his jaw tight. "It was. Michael was everything. He painted like you do, like the world was his to reshape. When he got sick, I promised I'd keep his art alive, keep this place alive." He gestured vaguely, encompassing the apartment, the building, the neighborhood. "That's why I don't sell. It's all I have left of him." I didn't know what to say, so I reached out, my hand brushing his. It was a small gesture, but it felt electric, like crossing a line we'd both been tiptoeing around. He didn't pull away, and for a moment, we just sat there, the silence heavy with possibility. "I don't talk about him," Julian said finally, his voice rough. "Not with anyone. But you're different." My heart skipped. Different how? He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "You remind me of him, but you're not him. You're you. And that scares me." I didn't know what to make of that, but before I could ask, he stood, breaking the moment. "It's late," he said, his voice clipped. "We've got a big day tomorrow." He left without another word, and I sat there, wine glass in hand, my mind reeling. Julian Caldwell was unraveling me, piece by piece, and I wasn't sure I could stop it. The next morning, I threw myself into the event preparations, trying to shake off the weight of his confession. The community room was transforming, walls lined with art, tables set with wine and hors d'oeuvres, a small stage for spoken word performances. Mia and Carlos were there, their energy infectious, but I couldn't focus. Every time Julian walked by, my eyes followed him, tracing the lines of his face, the tension in his shoulders. "Earth to Elliot," Mia said, snapping her fingers in front of my face. You okay? You've been staring at our fearless leader like he's a puzzle you need to solve. I flushed. Caught. I'm fine. Just stressed about the painting. She raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. Sure. And I'm the Queen of England. Spill. I hesitated, then lowered my voice. He told me something last night. About someone he lost. It's heavy. Mia's expression softened. Julian's got layers. Kid. Most people don't see them. Be careful. Okay. Careful. I frowned. What do you mean? She glanced at Julian, who was across the room talking to a caterer. He's not as tough as he seems. And you're not as guarded as you think. Her words stuck with me as the day wore on. By evening, the community room was ready, a vibrant space buzzing with anticipation. But my canvas was still blank, a glaring reminder of my failure. I slipped away to my apartment, desperate for inspiration, and found myself sketching Julian again, his face, his hands, the way he'd looked when he talked about Michael. A knock at the door startled me. It was Julian, his coat dusted with rain. You disappeared, he said, stepping inside. Everything okay? I gestured at the canvas, frustrated. It's not working. I don't know what you want from me. He studied the sketch, his expression unreadable. I want you to be honest, he said. Not just with the art, but with yourself. Easy for you to say, I snapped, my nerves fraying. You're not the one putting your heart on display for a room full of strangers. He stepped closer, his voice low. You think I don't know what that feels like? I've spent years hiding who I am. Elliot, you don't have to. His words hit like a punch. I wanted to argue, to push him away. But instead, I found myself saying, then why do you hide? Why do you act like nothing gets to you? He froze, his eyes darkening. For a moment, I thought he'd walk away. Then he said, because it's safer. Because losing someone again. He trailed off, his voice breaking. I didn't think. I just moved, closing the distance between us, my hand finding his. You don't have to lose anyone, I whispered. He looked at me, his breath catching, and for a moment, I thought he might kiss me. But then he pulled back, his walls slamming back into place. Finish the painting, he said, his voice rough. We're counting on you. He left, and I stood there, my heart racing, my hand still warm from his touch. I turned to the canvas, picking up my brush with new determination. If Julian wanted personal, I'd give it to him. I'd paint my me fears, my desires, the way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. The next few days were a whirlwind. The event was a week away, and the pressure was crushing. I painted late into the night, pouring everything into the canvas, me small town shame, my Capitol Hill freedom, the spark I felt with Julian. The painting took shape, two figures in a rain-soaked city, their hands almost touching, their faces alive with longing. Julian checked in daily, his presence both a comfort and a challenge. We didn't talk about that night, but the tension between us grew, a silent promise of something more. One afternoon, as we hung the last of the art, he caught me staring at him. What? He asked, a half-smile playing on his lips. Nothing, I said, my face hot. Just, thanks for this. For believing in me. He looked at me, his eyes soft. You make it easy, Elliot. My heart leapt, but before I could respond, Carlos called us over, breaking the moment. The event was almost here, and I still wasn't sure if my painting or my heart could handle the exposure. The night of the art event arrived like a storm, electric and unpredictable. The community room glowed with fairy lights, the air thick with the scent of wine and anticipation. Artists mingled with guests, their voices a vibrant hum, while a local poet performed on the stage, her words weaving stories of love and resistance. I stood in the corner, clutching a glass of cheap Merlot, my heart pounding as I scanned the room for Julian. My painting hung on the far wall, covered with a cloth until the big reveal. I'd finished it just hours ago, my hands still stained with paint, my nerves frayed from the weight of what I'd created. It was raw, unfiltered, a portrait of two men, one young and searching, the other older and guarded, their hands reaching across a divide of rain and light. It was us, Julian and me, and I had no idea how he'd react. Mia found me, her eyes bright with excitement. "You ready for this? Elliot, your piece is going to steal the show." I forced a smile, my stomach churning. "I hope so. Or I might just throw up." She laughed, squeezing my arm. "You got this. And hey, your landlord's been staring at you all night. What's up with that?" I followed her gaze and found Julian across the room, talking to a group of artists but glancing my way. His coat was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and the sight of him relaxed, almost vulnerable, made my chest tighten. "Nothing's up," I lied, taking a swig of wine. "He's just Julian." "Uh-huh," Mia said, smirking. "Keep telling yourself that." Before I could respond, Julian took the stage, his presence commanding the room. He thanked the artists, the guests, the neighborhood, his voice steady but warm. "This building," he said, "has been a home for dreamers, for people who don't fit anywhere else. Tonight, we celebrate them." His eyes found mine, and for a moment, the room faded away. The crowd applauded, and then it was time. Julian gestured to my painting, inviting me to the front. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself to move, pulling the cloth away with a trembling hand. The room went quiet, then erupted in murmurs and gasps. I didn't dare look at Julian, but I felt his gaze burning into me. The painting was everything I'd feared and hoped it would be. The younger man stood in a rain-soaked alley, his eyes wide with hope and fear. The older man, Julian, faced him, his expression a mix of longing and restraint, their hands inches apart. A rainbow flag blurred in the background. It was a love letter, a confession, a risk I couldn't take back. The crowd loved it. They crowded around, asking questions, praising the emotion, the color, the story. But I only cared about one person's reaction. I turned to Julian, my heart in my throat, and found him staring at the painting, his face unreadable. "Elliot," he said finally, his voice low, "can we talk?" I nodded, following him to a quiet corner of the room. My hands were shaking, my mind racing with what he might say. "What did you think?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes locked on mine. "You painted us," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You saw me." I swallowed, my throat tight. "Was that okay?" He reached out, his fingers brushing my wrist, sending a jolt through me. "It's more than okay. It's everything." The air between us crackled, and for a moment, I thought he might close the distance, might kiss me right there in front of everyone. But then he stepped back, his walls snapping back into place. "You did good," he said, his voice steadier now. "Really good." I wanted to push, to ask what he was feeling, but the moment was gone. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Compliments, handshakes, promises of gallery interest. My painting was a hit, but all I could think about was Julian, the way he'd looked at me, the way his touch had lingered. After the event, I helped clean up, my mind still spinning. Julian stayed late too, moving tables, his silence heavy with unspoken words. When the last guest left, he turned to me, his expression softer than I'd ever seen. "You surprised me tonight," he said. I didn't think you had it in you. I laughed, nervous. Thanks. I think. He smiled, a real smile that made my heart skip. You're welcome. And I'm sorry if I've been hard on you. It's just, he hesitated, running a hand through his hair. You make me feel things I haven't felt in a long time. My breath caught. Julian, I don't, he said, cutting me off. Not tonight. Just, let me sit with this. He left before I could respond, and I stood there, alone in the empty room, my heart pounding with hope and fear. I'd bared my soul in that painting, and Julian had seen me. But what did that mean for us? The next day, I woke to a text from Julian. Meet me at the building. 10 a.m. We need to finish this. My stomach flipped. Finish what? The event. The rent. Or something else entirely. I arrived to find him in the community room, surrounded by leftover decorations. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed, but there was a warmth in his gaze that hadn't been there before. Elliot, he said, setting down a box. I owe you an apology. For what? I asked, confused. For keeping you at a distance. For being afraid. He stepped closer, his voice low. That painting, it reminded me what it feels like to be alive. To want something Somioni again. My heart raced, but before I could speak, he held up a hand. I'm not good at this, he said, but I want to try. With you. I stood frozen, Julian's words echoing in my head like a melody I couldn't unhear. He wanted to try with me. The man who'd built walls higher than the Seattle skyline was standing in front of me, vulnerable, asking for a chance. My mouth went dry, and for once, my artist's instinct to capture every detail failed me. All I could see was him. Julian, I started, my voice shaky. What does that mean? Try what? He took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting in a way that made him seem younger, less certain. I don't know exactly, he admitted. I just know I can't keep pretending you're just a tenant. Not after last night. Not after that painting. My heart pounded, a mix of hope and fear swirling in my chest. I wanted to step closer, to bridge the gap between us, but I was terrified of what it would mean. You're my landlord, I said, the words sounding hollow even to me. And you. I'm just. Don't. He interrupted, his voice sharp but not unkind. Don't say you're just anything. You're Elliot. You're the guy who painted my soul on a canvas without even trying. I flushed, my eyes dropping to the floor. I didn't mean to. I didn't know if you'd be okay with it. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, the faint scent of his cologne. I'm more than okay with it, he said softly. It scared the hell out of me, but it also woke me up. I looked up, meeting his gaze, and saw something raw there, something that mirrored the longing I'd poured into my painting. So what now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, then reached out, his fingers grazing mine. Now, we figure it out. Together. If you want to. I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. I want to. For a moment, we just stood there, hands touching, the world narrowing to the space between us. Then he pulled back, a small smile breaking through his guarded expression. Good, he said. But we've still got work to do. This place isn't going to clean itself. I laughed, the tension easing. You're the worst romantic ever. He grinned, a rare, boyish grin that made my heart flip. I'm out of practice. Cut me some slack. We spent the morning cleaning up, moving tables, packing away decorations. It was mundane work, but every glance, every brush of his arm against mine, felt charged with meaning. I caught him watching me, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen, and I wondered what it would be like to kiss him, to feel the weight of his past and the promise of our future in one moment. By afternoon, we were done, the community room back to its dusty self. Julian suggested coffee, and we ended up at the same cafe on Pine Street, sitting in the same corner table. This time, though, the air was different, lighter, filled with possibility. "Tell me about Michael," I said, surprising myself. I needed to know, not just for him, but for us. Julian's expression tightened, but he didn't shut down. "He was fearless," he said, his voice low. "An artist, like you. He painted the world as he saw it. No apologies. When he got sick, he kept painting, even when he could barely hold a brush. I thought I'd never see that kind of fire again. Until you." I swallowed, my heart aching for the man he'd lost and the weight he still carried. "I'm not him," I said quietly. "I don't want to be a replacement." "You're not," Julian said, his voice firm. "You're you, Elliot. That's why this scares me. Because it's new, and it's real." I reached across the table, taking his hand. "It scares me too. But I'm here." He squeezed my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. And for the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. Two people reaching across a divide, not quite sure where it would lead. The next few days were a whirlwind of newness. Julian and I texted constantly, small messages that felt like lifelines. He'd send me photos of the building, updates on repairs, and once, a selfie of him in his office, captioned "Bored without you." I saved that one, my heart doing somersaults. I started a new painting, this one less guarded, more hopefulous cityscape with two figures walking side by side, their shadows blending into one. It wasn't finished, but it felt like a promise, a vision of what we could be. One evening, Julian invited me to his apartment on the top floor of the building. I'd never been there, and the thought made my stomach flutter. His place was nothing like mine, sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But there were touches of warmth, a shelf of worn books, a framed painting that had to be Michael's, vibrant and bold. "Dinner," he said, gesturing to a spread of takeout on the counter. "I'm not much of a cook." I laughed, relaxing. "You're full of surprises." Julian Caldwell. We ate, talked, laughed, the conversation flowing easily. He told me about his law practice, the cases he took pro bono for queer kids in trouble. I told him about my small-town childhood, the years of hiding, the freedom I found in Seattle. And then, as the city lights sparkled outside, he leaned across the counter and kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid I'd pull away. But I didn't. I kissed him back, my hands finding his shoulders, his hair, the world narrowing to the feel of him, the taste of him. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "I didn't plan this," he whispered. "Good," I said, smiling. "Neither did I." The kiss changed everything. It was like a door swinging open, letting in light I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Julian and I didn't talk about it afterward, didn't label it, but the air between us was different, warmer, charged with a quiet understanding. We spent the rest of the evening on his couch, talking until the city outside went quiet, our hands tangled together like it was the most natural thing in the world. The next morning, I woke in my own bed, my mind replaying every moment, the taste of his lips, the way his eyes softened when he looked at me. I wanted to paint it, to capture the feeling of falling without knowing where I'd land. But first, I had to face the day and the reality of my still overdue rent. Julian texted me as I was making coffee, "Meet me at the building. Got something to show you." My heart skipped, half expecting another confession, half dreading a return to our landlord-tenant dynamic. I found him in the basement, surrounded by boxes and old furniture, his sleeves rolled up, a smudge of dust on his cheek. What's this? I asked, stepping over a pile of old records. He grinned, holding up a canvas wrapped in cloth. Found it while cleaning out Michael's old storage unit. Thought you'd want to see. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a paintinga vibrant abstract, all swirls of color and emotion. Unmistakably Michael's work. My breath caught. It was like seeing a piece of Julian's heart laid bare. It's beautiful, I said, my voice thick. He was incredible. Julian nodded, his eyes distant. He was. I haven't looked at this in years. Too painful. He glanced at me, his expression softening. But you make it easier. I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there, our shoulders brushing as we looked at the painting. It felt like a bridge between his past and our present, a reminder that love could endure even through loss. The rest of the week was a delicate dance. We worked together on building repairs, stole moments in the stairwell, kissed in the shadows of the community room. But there was a tension too, a question neither of us asked. What were we doing? Was this real? Or was it just a moment? A spark that would burn out? One night, as we sat on the roof of the building, the city sprawling below us, I found the courage to ask. Julian, I said, my voice steady despite my nerves. What are we? Are we something? He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the city lights. I want us to be, he said. But I'm not easy to be with. Elliot, I've got baggage, history, and you're young. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Don't do that, I said, my voice sharp. Don't push me away because you think you're protecting me. I'm not a kid. I know what I want. He studied me, then reached for my hand. And what's that? You, I said simply, my heart pounding. All of you. The good, the bad, the history. I want it. He didn't speak for a long moment, then pulled me close, his lips finding mine in a kiss that felt like a promise. Okay, he whispered against my mouth. Let's do this. But life, as always, had other plans. The next morning, I got a call from a gallery owner who'd seen my painting at the event. They wanted to meet, to discuss a solo show. It was everything I dreamed of, but it came with a catch. They wanted me to move to New York, to immerse myself in the art scene there. I told Julian that evening, my heart heavy with the choice I didn't want to make. It's a huge opportunity, I said, pacing my apartment. But it means leaving Seattle. Leaving you. He listened quietly, his expression unreadable. You have to go, he said finally. This is your chance, Elliot. You can't let it pass. I stopped pacing, my chest tight. But what about us? He stood, crossing the room to me. We'll figure it out. Long distance, visits, whatever it takes. I'm not letting you go that easily. I wanted to believe him, but the doubt lingered, a shadow over the fragile thing we'd built. The next few days were a blur of excitement and dread. I met with the gallery owner, signed contracts, planned my move. Julian was there through it all, supportive but distant, like he was bracing himself for goodbye. The night before I left, he came to my apartment, his eyes shadowed with something I couldn't name. I have something for you, he said, handing me a small, wrapped package. Inside was a sketchbook, old and worn, filled with Michael's drawings. He'd want you to have it, Julian said, to remind you who you are, wherever you go. Tears stung my eyes as I flipped through the pages, each sketch a piece of a life cut short. Thank you, I whispered, pulling him into a hug. For everything. He held me tightly, his voice rough. Don't forget me, Elliot. Never, I promised. And we kissed. A desperate, searing kiss that held all the words we couldn't say. New York was a whirlwind of noise and color, a city that demanded everything I had. The gallery show was a success. my paintings selling faster than I could paint them. But every night, alone in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, I thought of Julian. We texted, called, even video chatted, but the distance was a weight neither of us could ignore. I kept Michael's sketchbook on my nightstand, flipping through it when the loneliness hit hardest. His drawings were a lifeline, a reminder of the man who'd loved Julian, and the man who loved me now. I painted them both, Julian's quiet strength, Michael's fiery passion, blending their stories with mine. 3 months in, Julian surprised me with a visit. He showed up at my studio, his coat dusted with snow, his smile tentative but warm. "You look good," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt like home. "You too," I said, my voice thick. "I missed you." We spent the weekend together, exploring the city, stealing kisses in crowded cafes. He told me about the building, the new tenants, the art events he was planning. I told him about my work, the pressure, the thrill of being seen. But beneath it all was the unspoken question, could we make this work? On his last night, we lay in my bed, the city humming outside. "I don't want to lose you," I said, my voice barely audible. "You won't," he said, his fingers tracing my jaw. "We're in this, Elliot. For real." And we were. Over the next year, we made it work, flights back and forth, long nights on the phone, visits filled with laughter and love. I painted. He fought for his tenants. And together, we built something neither of us had expected, a life. One evening, back in Seattle for a visit, we stood on the roof of the building, the city lights stretching out before us. I'd brought a new painting, a gift for him, a portrait of us, hand in hand, the rainbow flag bright in the background. "It's us," I said, my voice trembling. "It's everything we've been through, everything we are." Julian looked at it, his eyes shining with tears. "It's perfect," he said, pulling me close. "You're perfect." And then, in a moment that felt both inevitable and impossible, he dropped to one knee, his hand shaking as he held out a simple silver ring. "Elliot," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I came to collect the rent all those months ago, but you gave me something else, your heart. Will you let me keep it? Forever?" I laughed through my tears, nodding as I pulled him up, kissing him with all the love I had. "Yes," I whispered. "Forever." The building, the neighborhood, the art, it was all part of us now. A tapestry of love and loss, struggle and triumph. We'd shared a fitting room of sorts, trying on pieces of each other's lives, and found something far more intimate than either of us had expected. It wasn't just a home. It was ours.